Welcome to the NABS podcast. NABS is the support organisation for those working in advertising, marketing and media. I'm your host, Louise Scody. Each week I'll be chatting with someone from our industry to find out how they support themselves and those around them through challenging times as well as the day-to-day. And it's all to help you support your own mental wellness. I can't wait to start chatting. This week, our guest is Ed Couchman. Ed is one of Adland's most prolific senior leaders. He's currently head of sales, UK and Northern Europe at Spotify, and before this held management roles at Snapchat, Facebook and Channel 4. Ed is just as prolific in his charity work. He's a trustee of the Media Trust, a national charity that uses the power of media to give charities a voice and change lives. He's given his time to various charities that support people from underrepresented groups and drive forward social mobility. Ed's also a popular member of the Stranger Than Summer Committee, Stranger Than Summer being the annual fundraising gala for NABS, that this year raised £120,000 in essential funds to help advance our industry's mental wellness. Welcome, Ed. It's super to have you on the NABS podcast. How are you? And importantly, have you recovered from Stranger Than Summer?
Good morning, Louise. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your kind invitation. It's a beautiful, sunny Monday morning, so all is right with the world. And I have to confess, it did take me a couple of days to recover from Stranger Than Summer this time. I think it's as I get older, those big nights out do catch up with me. But seriously, it was such a great event as always. It's so lovely to see the industry come together. I honestly think it is one of the highlights of the sort of calendar for the whole media industry. So yeah, it's a brilliant night. And of course, for a great cause.
Our industry is very much about being sociable and getting together. Having that long period of time where we were all just stuck at home and not able to do that, I mean, that's something that would have impacted on mental wellness. How did it make you feel?
It's a really good question because it was mixed emotions and mixed feelings for me. I definitely, didn't miss getting the 7:18 commuter express each morning. And I definitely enjoyed being able to spend more time with my family and being a bit more present. But I think some of that wore off the longer that we were away from the office and away from our teams, essentially. I definitely, when I reflect, get my energy from being with people, and being in the sort of spare room, the kitchen table or the hallway every day does get a little repetitive and it does get a little bit draining. There's no two ways about that. So for me, our new hybrid way of working, we have a couple of days in the office and we have a couple of days at home, is just perfect for me.
What else do you need for mental wellness? What does mental wellness look like for you?
It is a biggie. So I think you've touched on those important components of like basically balance, some work, some fun, some family. I would add one more important element, and that is taking time for yourself, which I know sounds incredibly selfish, but a little bit of self-care for helping sort of recharge your energy, recharging your sort of compassion so you can then give out to others, I think is really important. And then whatever that might be is entirely, down to those individual passions and hobbies and interests of individuals, right? So it could be reading the book, it could be walking the dog, it could be riding a bike. But whatever that might be, I do think some self-care and taking some time for yourself, whatever that might be, is really, really important.
I'm really interested in the notion of self-care. It's become such a buzz phrase over the past few years and somehow associated with lighting a candle and wearing some slippers. And while that is also very lovely, that's not necessarily the kind of self-care that you need to really bolster yourself and, as you said, recharge yourself. Is it for you doing something active?
For me personally, it is, right? But activity is not necessarily working up a sweat, right? Sometimes that is that. I do like doing a quick Peloton ride. And I actually did one this morning.
Very good.
Yeah, so I'm very, very pleased with myself. Obviously, I've just done that just so I could say that live on the podcast. But it could also be walking the dog. I really struggle with mindfulness. I seem to fall asleep. But what I do is try to sort of slow down at different times. Listening to other podcasts is a great way for doing that. So I'm a big fan of The Rest is Politics. Not everyone in my household likes listening to that, but that's something I just do on my own. I could be combining some stuff as well. I could be walking the dog and listening to that. But I think that's sort of taking some time out to do something purposefully just for you. I think that's at the heart for my interpretation of self-care, essentially. And I just think it's so valuable.
So if you are currently listening to this podcast while having a walk, dog or not, you are taking some essential time for yourself. So we're really happy to be on that journey with you. I'm also really interested in something you said about recharging your compassion, because you're really involved with NABS. We're a charity, and obviously you have your other charity work as well. you're a great believer in mental wellness. So, two questions here. What is it about recharging your compassion that's so necessary? Is that what helps you to contribute not just to NABS but so many other charities? Like, if you're going to volunteer, do you need to do this recharging work? And also, where did your passion for mental health come from? Is that your own mental health journey that's contributed to where we are today having this chat?
Very thoughtful questions. Do you know what? I give my time for a sense of wanting to give back. Essentially, I think the industry has been wonderful to me. I'm very grateful. I've had many opportunities and many successes, and been part of some fabulous, fabulous teams. So a sense of giving back to the industry that's been so good to me is very important, and that's what really drives my motivations. That sense of sort of self-care or restoring your compassion, I just think helps keep you going, if that makes sense. So like if you had
Yeah.
a bad week, a bad day, a bad moment, taking the time out for yourself, I think is important. And I do try and subscribe to this notion of sometimes slowing down to speed up. That, we work in an ever faster paced industry and world, and sometimes actually pausing for a moment to take a breath, take a beat, I think helps you speed up later in the day, week, month, quarter, whatever it might be. I think the second part of your question, though, really is one that sort of deserves sort of deeper reflection. And when I was sort of pausing, sort of collating my thoughts this morning, ready to talk to you, I thought it would be interesting to share a more personal story, actually. And if I sort of rewound to 2012, I think that's really when my first deeper understanding of mental well-being really began. And it wasn't myself, but it was with my wife, who, in short, had a complete breakdown and had to go into some residential care for a while. It was a relatively short stay; it's around 10 to 12 days, but it's a very poignant moment in our lives, in our relationship, in our family's life as well. And she was diagnosed with bipolar at that time, and she's a high, what's described as a high achieving, high forming bipolar. So she lives a very normal life, in short, but it does take a large amount of willpower and medication as well to make sure that she can, do everything that she wants to do in her life. But I go back to that time because actually um, I was like just a terrible husband, in short, that I didn't actually fully understand it. I tried to ignore it. And, I had all these really terrible phrases of things like, but it's a beautiful day outside. Why aren't you feeling well? Or, come on, you're made of stronger stuff. Pull your socks up. All those things that you really shouldn't say or do. And all those things that really are very, very unhelpful, essentially. But it wasn't until I sort of saw firsthand about those mental health struggles, and then the role that carers need to do to help support those people they love, and the important role they play, that really started my sort of deeper understanding and acceptance, really, of sort of mental well-being. And if I fast forward from 2012 to 11 years later, I said, Joe, my wife, is high functioning. She's very successful career, and we have a very happy family life. But we do have to make some sort of compromises, and we do have to make some changes in our life to make sure that we don't place too much stress on Joe that triggers some of her sort of bipolar episodes. And of course, it hasn't been a smooth journey at all. There's been many ups and downs on that, as all four of us in our family sort of learn about bipolar and mental well-being, to make sure that we're accepting of that, and to make sure that we sort of make those changes or compromises to make sure that we are sort of a happy, functioning family unit. But essentially, it was that point of thinking, God, I'm being really poor at this. And also, it took me a while to understand that as well, to have that moment of, in fact, it was a great book that I would recommend. It's just a cartoon book. It's called Black Dogs. And it has these wonderful sort of art illustrations, graphic novel, I think it might also be sort of referred to, maybe. But it really helps you understand how someone suffering from mental health, depression, or bipolar is thinking and feeling. And that really sort of opened my eyes. That was my very first important step, essentially.
What a step. Well, I would just like to say, firstly, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and truthful and sharing that story. And it's great to hear that Joe and all of you are in a good place now with the right kind of support. I think it really highlights that you need to go and get support, and the support is out there. And with NABS, if you or someone in your family or even someone in your team appears to be struggling in whatever way with their mental health, mental wellness, you can give us a call and we'll help to signpost if we don't have the resources ourselves. Well, equally, we could refer you to therapy if that's something that's going to help. And it also highlights for me the importance of looking after your own mental wellness if you are a carer. And I think there's possibly not enough awareness yet of that in our industry. Would you agree? Because there are invariably lots of people in our industry who are in similar situations to you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Louise, that actually, and it goes back to that very first question about self-care, that taking a moment and looking after yourself so you can give to others. That actually, if it's all just one way and all just sort of you giving, then you're going to get to a place where you're just exhausted, you may be a little resentful, you're tired, and you just don't have the energy to do that. But by taking a moment for yourself, I then think you can give to others, essentially. Yeah, I think it is really, really crucial.
There's the old phrase, isn't it? You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, and it's although some of those old phrases are actually just really wise words, aren't they? They're just actually
Yeah.
truisms.
Yeah, so true. And from a working parent perspective as well. I mean, when my cup is empty, then everything's going to fall down. So I need to make sure that I do little things to top myself up as well. It is amazing, even more amazing now, having heard that story, that you still have the time and energy and headspace to devote to your charity work, and especially thinking about your work to support social mobility. So you've done a lot of speaking to students from working class backgrounds, for example. Why is this so important to you? And especially when we're looking at the situation in our own industry, we've had surveys such as NABS' own diversity and focus survey and the recent all-in census results, showing that the industry can be a really difficult place from people from those socioeconomic backgrounds. What is it that draws you to work to support this quarter of our industry?
Again, it's a little bit of a from personal nature. I went to a comprehensive school in Solihull, just on the outskirts of Birmingham. I was the first member of my family to graduate from a university, and I'm grateful that I had a lot of support actually from my teachers. Actually, particularly my comprehensive school teachers were really supportive of me. Um, But I think what drives it is a sense of sort of fairness and equality. There is so much talent, actually. If I recall my school days, a long time ago now, but a lot of my schoolmates were highly talented individuals, but some of their aspirations or the role models around them just didn't have sort of career paths or career networks into the creative industries, into banking, into finance, into architecture, into medicine. Like no one we lived in a very sort of working class area. There was a local manufacturing company, and most people went to work there. It's actually over 80%, and over sort of 80%, I would say, of their parents, mostly fathers, actually also worked in that same manufacturing plant. So the sort of career aspirations and career role models just weren't there. And I think that's an important part of the work that I want to do for Speakers for Schools, where essentially you go to different schools up and down the country. Actually, I normally volunteer to go back to schools in Birmingham and just talk about the opportunities in technology or in the creative industries. And just to say that actually, look, there are jobs and roles out there for people like you. And you might not have thought about these jobs and roles, but they're there for you. And I was once like you, although it was quite a humbling experience actually the very first time I did it. So I was thinking I looked like just like you. I was a kid from this neighborhood essentially, and not really fully appreciating that now I look very different from that, and I act very different from that. And so I sort of walked in and basically got completely heckled for sort of 45 minutes, and the headmaster had to sort of come back in and get control of the of the room for me. Basically, they just asked me loads of really challenging questions, but it was really a good moment for me to realize that actually I thought I looked like those kids I was standing in front of because that's where I come from, but now I look very different. And I think it's important for me to realize that actually that now I am from privilege essentially, even though I don't always feel that, but realize that I'm from privilege, and therefore sort of going back to help other people sort of up the ladder is really important. And then I think there's sort of philosophical arguments about, I said, fairness and equality, sort of social cohesion, that unlocking that talent and potential, and all the long-term benefits that social mobility provides. And without getting too political, I do think that as a country, we have a very, very long way to go on social mobility. and it does pain me that actually I don't feel that we're moving forward. But instead of sort of throwing stones from the outside, I said I like to sort of roll my sleeves up and do some stuff, and even whatever small difference that makes, then I like to kind of, I said that's speakers for schools. I've done some work for the Social Mobility Foundation in the past as well, and just try and make a tiny, tiny difference where I can. Mm.
How do you think the industry is measuring up? Because obviously you're doing all of this great work, and there are other people in our industry. Look at Brixton
Mm.
Finishing School, Ali Owen, what she's doing over there. There's a couple of other grassroots organisations that are helping working class people into the industry.
So it's an initiative called Common People, led by Jed Hallam, who set that up for people of a similar background. So I think there are efforts afoot, but we've all seen some of the reports that NABS have done, and the fantastic work from the Advertising Association on the All-In census to show how much work is still to be done. Uh, a quick aside, actually, and I think it chimes to this point about feeling like you don't fit in. My very first job was at an investment bank called Morgan Stanley in the late 90s. That sort of height of Cool Britannia and sort of lad culture. And I look back at that and realize I really didn't fit in, and that's really why I didn't stay. So I was wearing the wrong shirt. I was wearing brown shoes when I should have been wearing black shoes. I didn't wear cufflinks. My Windsor knot wasn't a Windsor knot. It was a schoolboy tie. All those social clues that tell people that you aren't from that background. And if I think there's some parallels now to the media industry, where it might not be about shoes and tie knots and cufflinks, but it's about your trainers or your brand of t-shirt, essentially. That these soft, subtle things where people basically make judgments. So I think it's really important then, as leaders, that we try and create these more sort of inclusive teams where people can feel a sense of belonging, essentially. So when they turn up to work, they can see people that look like them, act like them, talk like them, and essentially try and make sure they've got a good friend at work. Because I think when you look at all the research, most people stay in a job because they've got a close friend in their team around them, essentially. And I think that's really important.
We've had Bruce Daisley on the podcast, and probably his number one tip is get yourself a best friend at work, because, as you say, that makes the difference between you staying and going. So there's so much to pick up on what you just said. Firstly, NABS does inclusive leader training designed to help managers do exactly that, create teams in which everybody feels as though they can belong. Secondly, as a leader yourself, what would be one or two things that managers can do to help create a more inclusive atmosphere? Is it really the case that if you turn up with the wrong trainers, people are going to judge you? I mean, is it that stark in quarters of the industry?
Well, that's a tough question. I really, really want to say no to that, but I hope I'm not being naive and Pollyanna-esque. I really hope it's not consciously, but I think subconsciously. Yeah, like I definitely heard comments about someone's trainers. You know what? I think I have. I actually think
Yeah.
I have. Yeah,
So it's about trying to get everyone away from that mindset rather than saying, as maybe this would have been the approach, say, 20 years ago. Listen, these are the trainers that you need to buy to fit in. So we're not encouraging people to code switch or to be something that they're not, but actually
yeah,
to create an atmosphere in which people can turn up as they are.
yeah, and their true selves, right? Whatever that trainer brand or trainer type might be.
So then to go back to the question, what do you do as a leader to help that to happen?
Um, I think you have a role in making sure that you are attracting talent and recruiting talent from all sorts of backgrounds. So making sure that you have diverse long lists of talent and short lists, ideally. I think that most of the tech companies I work for, or have worked for in the past, sorry, have like what are called interview loops or panels. So you have 4 or 5 people uh, sort of assessing a candidate, ensuring that those 4 or 5 people are from a pretty diverse look and feel and skill set. So you might have an introvert as well as an extrovert. You might have someone who's more analytical and data driven, as well as maybe someone who's more visual. And obviously people's sort of backgrounds are also different. So that means then that someone coming into the building feels like, okay, then there's someone like me here. I think that's important.
And I'd also add that NABs have got a variety of free classes, essentially, that can help people with their confidence and career building and growth mindset. And these are all things that can help people to feel as though they can succeed at work as well. So do have a look at what we've got to offer and encourage people to sign up to those. So as well as supporting people to feel themselves and to feel included, and that's all part of mental wellness, thinking really broadly about mental wellness. What can you do to support the mental wellness of your teams? And what do you do to encourage people? And clearly, you're someone that talks very openly about your own experience of mental wellness and dealing with mental health in your family. And I think leading from the top and being honest from the top is a really big part of this. And people feel that it's okay to talk about these things and actually to do something about it. But what else do you think that we can do?
Yeah, so plus one to all that, I think that's very wise words. Um, I think there's a number of things that we can do as sort of leaders or with the team. Again, apologies if I sort of jump from very practical to maybe more philosophical. One thing personally I love, so this is kind of just speaking from the heart, is going for walking one-to-ones. And
Yeah.
we're quite fortunate at Spotify, actually. We're opposite a small park, and you can do a couple of laps of a park in a half hour or 45 minutes. I personally feel you can have a much richer, deeper, meaningful conversation with your team when you're out away from your desk in the fresh air and walking. I think there's also something really quite tangible that you walk side by side, and obviously, in most meetings, you sit face each other and have that eye contact. And I think there's something very disarming around walking side by side, where it feels less sort of confrontational in some ways, and therefore you can have a bit more of a sort of meaty conversation and deal with some pretty thorny issues. But it just feels like you're doing it in a much more sort of calm, measured manner, actually. So I really subscribe to that. I don't do every walk, every one-to-one, but I'd make sure that I do at least every other week as a walking. So that's the first thing. I think secondly, as I said, we talked about ERG groups. And I think they're important. I said giving them money to be able to do things. I think it's no point just saying, hey, get together. I think it's one thing. Secondly, I think you can incorporate participation in ERG groups into people's performance reviews and acknowledge the time they're giving to not just the business but to the culture of a team, essentially, and try and make sure people get recognition for that time they give. Because let's be honest, I know it might be during the working day, but I do believe that most people then will probably catch up on some of that work later that evening. So they're actually doing kind of extra things. So I think giving them recognition. And we recently had a employee survey. And one of the things that struck me loud and clear was the team just want to have fun at times. They like spending time with each other. They work really hard, and then giving them permission to have some fun. So we have a great committee at Spotify called Good Vibes, and they're organising a range of activities like a sports day, a games, board games. So I think the other thing that's important is not just making them always alcohol or in the pub based or evening based, right?
Agreed. Yes.
If it's just evenings, that can exclude some working parents or people that maybe have to look after their parents, so carers. If it's alcohol based, then you're going to exclude people as well, unintentionally. So therefore, like creating some more inclusive type environment, so like board games or sports day, whatever it might be, are really good ways of bringing people together with the best of intentions. And I think those sort of like giving the team some moments to have fun and permission to do that and some space is really, really important.
I think so. It's one of the reasons why people came to work in this particular industry in the first place. It does have that reputation as being fun where people can get together. And now that we're in a hybrid world where we can go into the office a bit, it's possible, but I think we need a bit of help and encouragement because a lot of us have lost our way. When you're stuck at home for 2 years, you do forget how to socialize, right? So it's great to hear that Spotify have got something structured to encourage people to get back together.
Yeah, and the other good thing is all from the ground up. Actually, like I think as a leader, you're right. You do have a responsibility to set the tonality in the environment, but I think having some stuff ground up, say a social committee, whatever it might be, the RG groups are ground up as well. I think that's really important to make sure the team have a voice and a sense of belonging. It's not all tops down, actually, but it is a muscle. You're right about this coming together, and I think almost you can lose things by accident if you don't make sure you put some effort into them. So ensuring that you put some effort into having some fun and having some good times, I think is really, really crucial.
And what's one thing that we could all do to support our mental wellness this week?
So can I do two things?
Absolutely.
All right, two things. One, take a moment for yourself. Like, as we talked about that self-care, do something that you really want to do. Read a book, listen to music, listen to a podcast, do an exercise class, do nothing. So have a nap.
I love a
One
nap.
The second one, I think this is just ask someone if they're okay. And it's that question, and we all know this question, it's okay not to be okay. But really pausing to ask someone, looking them in the eye and go, hey, is everything okay? And I think that would be very, very valuable.
That's really good. And then if you don't quite know what to do with that answer, call NABS, because we can help you direct that person to somewhere that they can find some help. Now, we're here for preventative work and also crisis work. So you can come to us and get topped up along the way. And we'd love you to do that. But also, there's that crisis point as well. People call us and they really are in urgent need of help. What would be a big tip you can give to help people before they get to that crisis point, so we can try and avert that if necessary?
I think there's two things. I think the first is trying to have some level of self-awareness about how you're thinking and feeling, and a sort of gauge to yourself of, am I feeling level 5 stress? Am I feeling level 9 stress? So I think pausing and trying to have some self-reflection, I think, is really important. And I think that my second piece of advice would be making sure you have a really good sort of social network of friends, in the industry, outside the industry, friends, family, whatever, family, so that might be. But essentially, you have that social network so that you can rely on other people to help you when you need it, or just kind of know you. So they might be able to say, hey, you're not quite yourself at the moment, what's going on, what's happening. But I think the combination of the self-awareness and having a really good social network are two really key things that hopefully between those two things, they'll spot you before you get to that breaking point.
Definitely. And also, we know from studies that community helps to bolster your mental wellness in generally. So
Mm,
hopefully, if you are keeping in touch with people, whether it's through work or play or both, then you're less likely to suffer a challenge. Or if you are, as you say, at least it's going to get spotted and then you can get help
mm.
sooner rather than later. What is one lesson you've learned on how to support yourself?
Uh, One thing that stands out for me is actually focusing and being grateful for the things you do have, and not focusing and being frustrated for the things you don't have. And I think when you do just stop and self reflect on all the wonderful things that you have in your life, actually, they can be very fulfilling and very rewarding. And, you feel a deeper sense of gratitude. So much of people's time, and I include myself in this, my time still, you focus on the one thing you don't have, not
Yeah.
on the 9 wonderful things that you do have.
Yeah.
So I think trying to, and I don't journal. I know journal is a big thing with Gen Z and millennials. You write your daily gratitudes. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm too old for
So
that, I think.
you don't have a regular gratitude practice. You don't have
I
something structured.
I don't. But I think, when I do that sort of self-reflection of my scale of stress, what I would try and do at some point is to, I said, that sort of slowing down to speed up, and then sort of think, actually, all these things are going right now. It's just this one thing that isn't going right. Let me let me unpack that. Let me think of a plan how to tackle that. But really just to pause and go, look, all these other things are going really right. The whole world, the sky is not falling down here. It's okay. And then just sort of get a sense of balance from that.
You can get some much needed perspective, can't you?
Yeah, because really that's what you need at that moment in time, because things are out of perspective and out of kilter, and the problem or challenges feel overwhelming and that you can't tackle them. But having a sense of perspective, I think, is the exact key word.
So it's really great to end our chat on a practical tip, because we've just had practical tips throughout. Take some time for yourself. If you or someone that you are related to or friendly with is having a mental health challenge, then reach out to us or reach out to someone at work who can help. Um, Make sure that you're keeping in touch with your community and go for a walk, whether you have a dog or not. Maybe borrow somebody else's dog. Listen to a podcast, preferably this one. And hopefully that will all help you to feel okay and supported this week. Ed, it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure. Thank you for all of the work that you do to support people across our industry. It's been really wonderful to talk to you today.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you so much for such thought-provoking questions. It's been a real pleasure.